Okay, for this lecture we're going to look at Confucianism. The subtitle is The Rise of State Culture. This is a religion that emphasizes nationalism and the meshing together of politics and religion, um, almost a secularization of religion, yet there are still religious ideas in Confucianism. But I would more define it as a philosophical system for politics and ethics than a religion. But with the meshing of Taoist religious practices during the medieval period, Confucianism developed a more religious aspect to it, and so that's why it's identified as a religion. But early on, it's really more considered an ethical and political system of belief. So let's take a look at Confucius. Two great quotes to start off with. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You might have seen this before, either in a fortune cookie or a quote somewhere. The idea is that you can't get anywhere unless you start. And a lot of times, a lot of religions, particularly in the East, during this time period, in the 400 BC, they would focus on abstract things, abstract ideas, ideals and goals to work towards that were transcendent. Buddhism obviously was different, but in China we have Confucianism developed as the practical solution to religious questions, societal questions, human questions. He also says, by three methods we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is the noblest. Second, by imitation, which is the easiest, copying somebody. The third, by experience, which is the bitterest. Because once we experience life, a lot of times we are let down. Confucianism was rooted and came out of Chinese religion. So we've already talked about Taoism, but there are lots of other folk religious aspects to Chinese culture that Confucianism both embraced but then also reacted against. So Chinese religion in general is very eclectic. You can't really pigeonhole the people as a whole into one group, because there are many different states in China during this time period, many different cultures and some languages, many different languages. So there would be different deities and religious practices, but a lot of them kind of, surrounded this idea of, being in harmony, also nature worship, totemism, shamanism, focusing on ancestors and doing ancestral rites was really huge and important for bring about balance, but then also keeping the evil spirits at bay in the culture. So Confucianism mostly emphasized propriety, being in control. So we have the Shang Dynasty way back when, 1500 BCE. And we start to develop this idea of the cult of the royal ancestor, so the idea that the emperor had a divine right, or they were from the gods, and so were their successors. Then we have the classical period, after the Chow Dynasty in 722 to 221. This is when Taoism also emerged, but it's called the period of 100 philosophers. And then we had the Warring States period, where they kind of solidified power from a bunch of different city-states into an actual empire, a unified country. And then Emperor Shi Hongti united China in 221 BCE. Okay, so in folk religion, we have the supreme ruler. Then we have the Tien, which is the abode of spirits. These are where the ones who have died would go. We see in archaeological finds a lot of these religious mounds, and these were in all kinds of different cultures, both East and Native American even, way back in antiquity. But these mounds would symbolize fertility, and the deities would live on top of the mountains, and they would do different rituals there. But a lot of times, most of the religion was done in the household with shrines, ancestors that they would pray to and worship. So they have benevolent spirits, the kuais, and then we have the shin, which are benevolent spirits, and they're good. We get the name Shinto, the way of the good spirits, in Shintoism. That's what the word means. It's a Chinese word, not a Japanese one. We already talked about the yin and the yang in our lecture on Taoism, but this idea of the passive, the active, the feminine, the masculine, the evil, the good, all these different things to balance out things. Then we have the Wus. They were diviners in Chinese folk religion. Trigrams are ways of doing kind of different reading of the palms. I guess this is the Chinese version of reading of the palms. You would find to see what your personality and your future, a way of predicting the future based upon your trigram. Okay, so they had emperor rites and ancestor rites. They were usually done by the males, and if they didn't appease even the ancestral spirits, the relatives would haunt them as well. So the ancestors often became local deities in the different folk areas and city-state areas. Okay, so Confucius himself was born during the 500s BCE. It was elevated, the religion itself that he started was elevated to the state religion in the 2nd century when they solidified power under the state. And so if you have a religion that emphasizes solidarity and statehood, then it's very beneficial for a unified state. And it goes along with the political aspirations of the central empire. So I think this is why it was really accepted and embraced as the state religion. So Confucianism does expect to have the followers have reverence towards ancestor worship, ceremonies, and sacrificial practices, although most of Confucian thought is not really worried about the afterlife so much, per se, as this life. He himself really wanted to be a local magistrate, like a mayor in the town, but he kept failing the exam that was required to get that kind of a government job. So he became a teacher. Eventually he did pass the exam after many attempts, and he became a chief magistrate of Chengdu, an area of China. I'm not sure exactly where that was located. And the keystone of his teaching was sincerity. Sincerity in action, sincerity in thought, sincerity in intentions. It springs out of multiple different approaches. So there were two great leaders of Confucian thought after him, Mengzi. He emphasized government by compassion and not force. So he wanted a more democratic, I guess if you want to put it in those kinds of terms, emphasis to the religion and to society. He also believes in the innate goodness of human nature. He's very positive about the abilities of humans to get along with each other. And when we have evil in this world, it's only because of a consequence of corrupting our innate sympathetic disposition that we have, that we were born with. Sun Tzu opposed this, and he said that human goodness is not innate. Humans are born with desires that are limited and thus causes conflict. So we're born with these desires, let's say for food and sex and violence. And because we're limited and we're not able to act on those without reserve, this causes psychological conflict, and this is where evil arises out of this kind of natural conflict. A little bit of Freud there. Okay, so Neo-Confucianism. This is more recognizable as Confucianism. So, like I said, this took place during the medieval period, kind of the early days of the medieval period, and actually lasted until the communist rise of the Republic of China. And a lot of Neo-Confucianism, they absorbed a lot of the metaphysical elements of Taoism and Buddhism, so a lot of the religious aspects, actually, of those two religions, and incorporated them into the philosophical system and the political systems and ideologies of Confucianism. Okay, women under Confucius society, even though he believed that they could be educated, they could not remarry, but men could remarry and have concubines. So the 4 virtues of a woman are to know your place in the home, not speak unless spoken to. You have to be pretty. I don't know what you do if you weren't, but you had to be pretty. Must be able to take care of the family. So these are the 4 virtues of a woman. And a woman also is in the place of relationships to another man. So her whole life starts off with her father, relationship to her father, she's under him. And then when she's married, she's under her husband. And when her husband dies, she's under her eldest son. But the 5 relationships also extend to everyone in society. So there's a relationship that one has between a ruler to a subject and a subject to a ruler, from elders to juniors, or children, I guess you would say, and children to elders, from father to son and son to father, and a relationship from husband to wife and wife to husband, and then eldest son to younger sons. So there's kind of a hierarchy of relationships in the society, and each relationship has specific requirements and sincerity and propriety that goes along with them. The sons still were the only ones who could perform the ancestral rites. Okay, so some of their teachings of Confucian thought. Political philosophy is rooted in the proper amount of Ren. Okay, Ren is kind of like a power that you have that's accrued, amount of virtue that you have, this type of thing. Ren it has some metaphysical elements in Neo-Confucianism, but kind of originally it was this idea of the amount of virtue that you had by fulfilling your roles in society. Okay, so they kind of focus on the outward observances and rituals that ancestral religion had in China, and they try to focus on it by internalizing it before the action. So this is why Confucius emphasized sincerity. We can follow the law, follow the rules, but if we don't do it with a sincere heart and intention and will, then we're not doing it for the right reasons. We need to have the right internalization of rituals and observances and understanding of them in order to really fully do them properly on the outside. So Confucian philosophy, especially political philosophy, emphasized the way of trying to match the outside with the inside of people. Also emphasizes loyalty. So Confucius advocated respect of the real politic, the politics on the ground. And this is, even though the women were looked down upon in a lot of ways, that a ruler could be respected as superior, rectitude, and piety. But it also had an idea of equality as well, that everyone has value. So Confucius taught that people could advance in life according to their merits as well. Okay, so the government system that Confucius scholars set up, it's selectively traditionalist, so they take those things that they like and they toss everything else they don't like. So like I said, those who govern should be based on merit. So even Confucius himself, who failed the government exam several times, eventually did pass it, and he worked his way up in politics according to his hard work. So he didn't think that people should be held back from it, that those who govern should be governed because they're worthy of governing, and that everyone should be in it together. So even though Chinese society was very structured and hierarchical, in the Confucian philosophy they saw everyone as needing to work together for society to actually function. Everyone has to do their part in order for the state to survive, to flow. So that means that each little piece of the puzzle needs to be valued itself. Didn't advocate revolution. If you want a strong state, you usually temper down revolutionary actions and thoughts. But Confucianism also did a lot of educational reform. So there's some of the aspects of what they call the superior man in Confucian thought. He has the right balance of these four attributes: moral codes, love and compassion, righteousness, and virtue. And of course, Confucian thought emphasized the ethics of reciprocity, which is basically the golden rule: do unto others as you have them do unto you. Okay, the way they would educate people, a lot of times it was through music, poetry, rituals, and reflections on the meaning of names. So given a name in antiquity was really important. The ethical system was not based on theology. It was based on practical, on the ground, emphasized the life and proper respect to ancestors, and the Tien, the way of heaven. So the superior man, who has all those different virtues that I mentioned earlier, stands in awe of the ordinances of heaven, the awe of noblemen, the awe of the words of the sages. Okay, Confucianism changed pretty much forever once communism took over in China and the Cultural Revolution, particularly in the 60s. This really changed the social relationships and hierarchy in traditional Confucian culture. The sacred texts of Confucianism, or the Analects of Confucius, a huge body of literature actually. They mostly contain conversations between Confucius and his disciples. And of course the canon of what we would call Confucius scriptures spread from the 2nd century BCE to the 20th century CE. It's more about the philosophy than a sacred canon of literature. And that is Confucianism, this idea of meshing together a traditional folk Chinese religion with the idea of statehood and running society and proper government and solidarity amongst the people of a nation.